Excelsior Savings and Loan and the Elms Resort Hotel and Delta Omega chapter of Beta Sigma Phi, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. I can assure you, you will never forget the story you are about to hear from our featured speaker, Mr. Frank Abengale. We are pleased to announce that we have sold 242 tickets. Several of the people who purchased tickets were unable to be here, but we wanted to make that announcement because we are very pleased. As many of you know, a lot of time and effort goes into an event such as this. And we have squeezed it all into just over 30 days. But we were able to do so because we had a great source of inspiration, and his name is Jeff Love. The Love family was planning to attend, but after Jeff's checkup this morning, his physicians advised against his trying to be here tonight. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Love family. When working with someone as sweet as Jeff and for a cause as important as this, it is heartwarming to discover how many people are willing to help. We would like to thank Kevin and Sonia Morgan at the Leader Press for their posters, pamphlets, and tickets, and for their coverage in the marketplace. We would also like to thank Jim Watson and Don Ledford of the Daily Standard and the Daily News for the numerous articles that they have printed on this benefit. And special thanks to Jerry and Connie Maggart of J&C Trophy for their contributions. Although there have been a number of people involved with this, I would like to introduce two people who have worked very hard. Our Vice President and Membership Chairman, Renee Young, and our Treasurer and Ways and Means Chairman, Lisa Thacker. These two girls, along with myself, have served as the steering committee for Delta Omega. Our appreciation goes to Robin Steinkrutz and Laura McCullough of the Elms Resort Hotel, and the directors and staff of Excelsior Savings and Loan, who are our co-sponsors for this evening. All of these people have played an important part in this benefit, but one person has been instrumental in making it a success. If it were not for him, none of us would be here this evening. It is with great appreciation that I introduce to you from Excelsior Savings and Loan, Mr. Darrell Gelling.
Thank you. Thank everyone for coming here tonight. This one, I'm not used to it. About 8 years ago, I first went to a fraud seminar that Frank Abengale, our speaker, spoke at. I was really impressed with the guy. Didn't know much about him and enjoyed the talk. Several months ago, I had a chance to meet Mr. Abengale, once before season. Found out what kind of guy he really was. The kind of guy who would come here tonight for a benefit like this. I'm not going to tell you much more about it. He likes to talk about himself a lot. So here's my friend, Frank Abengale.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here this evening, and thank all of you for coming out tonight. We certainly appreciate your support of this worthwhile cause. Most of my public speaking is very educational, and last night I was in Kansas City for the banks there, and most of my speaking is very technical, revolved around banking. And occasionally I try to talk a little bit about my life, and that's what I'm going to do tonight to make it a little more interesting and entertaining for you. Those of you not familiar with me, my name is Frank Abengale. Back in the 1960s, many newspapers gave me lots of names. Some newspapers for many years referred to me as the Great Imposter. The New York Times wrote a syndicated column about me. The New York Times followed my exploits for about 5 years. The New York Times gave me the name the Skywayman. Not long ago, the Wall Street Journal, summing up my past career, said I would probably go down in history by far the world's greatest con man of all time. I earned all of those reputations when I was 16 years old. I successfully impersonated an airline pilot for Pan American Airlines for 2 years until I was 18. At the age of 18, I took a job on salary as the chief resident pediatrician of a Georgia hospital where I practiced medicine. I had been a gynecologist, but at 18 I didn't know any better. At the age of 19, having never been to law school in my life, I took the state bar exams in Louisiana. I passed the state bar, became a licensed lawyer there, and before my 19th birthday was over, I was the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, where I practiced in that position for about a year. At the age of 21, I was a college professor at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. I taught 2 full semesters there as a PhD. Mormons haven't quite got over it yet, but they're still working on it. And of course, before reaching my 21st birthday, before I was old enough to have a drink, I was a millionaire, twice over, having written $2.5 million worth of bad checks in over 26 foreign countries and all 50 states in the United States. A lot of people say, you know, I've seen you on Johnny Carson many times. I've read your book. I've read many stories about you over the years and articles. But what I always wonder is, why did a 16-year-old do all this? And how did a 16-year-old ever get away with it all? Well, you know, I can't say that I came from the slums. On the contrary, I came from an extremely wealthy, very politically powerful family. I was brought up just north of New York City. I was one of 4 children, educated by the Christian Brothers of Ireland since elementary school into high school. By the time I had reached the 10th grade in a private Catholic school, I had an IQ of about 140, almost a perfect photographic memory. I was one of 4 children in the family, the so-called middle child of the 4. My parents, after 22 years of marriage, one day decided to get a divorce. Unlike most divorces, where the children are always the first to know, my parents were very good about keeping it a secret. And one afternoon, I found myself taken out of class, and in a few hours, standing in front of a county judge in the county courthouse in White Plains, New York. I was being asked by the judge to decide on which parent I chose to live with, because under New York state law, I was 16 years old, and the choice was mine. I remember looking at the judge and then looking at my parents, and then turning and running out of the courtroom. The judge called for a 10-minute recess, but by the time my parents got outside to the street, I was gone. My mother never saw me again for about 7 years. My father, unfortunately, never saw me again ever. In the mid-1960s, running away was a very popular thing to do. Unfortunately, a lot of people got caught up in Haight-Ashbury, the hippie scene, the drug scene. Instead, I took a few belongings from my home, packed them in a knapsack, boarded the New Haven and Hartford Railroad down to New York City, and started looking for a job. My father owned a business in Manhattan on the corner of 40th and Madison. Since I was about 12 years old, I worked in that business in the summertime, making deliveries, running errands. I knew Manhattan quite well, so I started looking for the same type work. There were a lot of signs in the windows: stock boy, delivery boy. I'd walk around and apply. How old are you, young man? 16. How far did you go in high school? 10th grade. I'll hire you. And I went to work for a small amount of money, but soon realized I couldn't support myself on the amount of money I was being paid. But I wondered what would happen if I lied about my age. What if I wasn't 16? What if I was an adult in his mid-20s? I was 6 foot tall when I was 16, always had a little gray hair. My friends said I could easily pass for being in my 20s. And I wondered what would happen if I lied about my age. I did so. People believed I was 26 years old and not 16, paid me a little more money, but even then it was difficult to make ends meet. One of the few things I packed in that knapsack when I left home was a checkbook. I had a checking account since I was 14 years old. Had a couple of $100 in my account. Every so often I would write a check to supplement my income. The money was there, the checks were good, but it was my friends, my peers who used to walk along the streets of Manhattan with me that would say, "You know, Abengale, you're the only guy I know that walks in the bank in the middle of New York. You don't have an account there, you don't know a soul there, but they cash your check without batting an eye." Say, "Well, my checks are good." That might be, but they wouldn't touch my check with a 10-foot pole. You walk in there, they don't bat an eye. Years later, reporters would speculate and say that that was my upbringing, mannerisms, dress, intelligence, speech. Whatever it was very easy to do. And consequently, when the $200 ran out, I kept writing those checks. Of course, those checks started to bounce. My father had a great deal of political influence over New York City politics, so he had the police making a very special effort to find me as a runaway. And then the bad checks, I thought maybe it was a good time to start thinking about leaving New York City. But I was quite apprehensive about going to Chicago or Miami, where they cash a New York check on a New York driver's license as quickly as they did in Manhattan. I was walking up 42nd Street one day in the afternoon about 5 o'clock. I started to approach the front door of an old hotel that used to be there called the Commodore Hotel. And just as I got to the front door, out stepped an Eastern Airlines flight crew onto the sidewalk. I had to stop as they crossed the sidewalk dragging their bags behind them. I looked up and noticed the captain, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, about 4 flight attendants, all taking their bags to a van waiting for them at the curb, taking them to the airport. For some reason they caught my imagination, so I stopped and watched them for a moment as they loaded the van and it took off. I continued up 42nd Street and I thought to myself, that's it. What a perfect front. If one could pose as an airline pilot, then one could travel all over the world for free. and one could probably get just about anybody, anywhere, to cash a check for them. And I walked up the street a little further to 42nd and Park, where stood the 55 floors of the Pan Am building. Pan Am, the nation's flag carrier, the airline that flew around the world. I thought, what a perfect airline to use, Pan Am. So the next day I placed a phone call to the executive headquarters of Pan Am. I had absolutely no idea what I would say when the switchboard answered, but when they did, Pan American Airlines, good morning, may I help you? Yes, ma'am, I'd like to speak to someone in the purchasing department. Purchasing? One moment, please. The clerk came on and said, yes, sir, maybe you can help me. My name is John Black, co-pilot with the company based out of San Francisco. You know, I've been with the company for about 7 years, but I've never had anything like this come up before. What's the problem? Well, we flew a trip in here last night, 24-hour layover. We're continuing to London this afternoon. I sent my uniform out through the hotel yesterday to have it dry cleaned. But now the hotel and the cleaner say they can't find it. Here I am with a flight in about 4 or 5 hours and no uniform. Well, don't you have a spare uniform? Certainly back home in San Francisco, but I would never get it here in time for my flight. Well, hold on, I'll be right back. And he came back and he said, my supervisor says this will cost you the price of a new uniform. I understand. I'll need to send you down to the Well-Built Uniform Company on 5th Avenue. They're our supplier. I'll call them and let them know you're on the way. They'll take care of you. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to know, so I went down to the Well-Built Uniform Company. A little Jewish fellow, Mr. Rosen, fitted me out in the uniform. Standing there in the mirror, 6 foot tall, the black uniform, the 3 gold stripes on the arm of the co-pilot, the gray hair. I certainly looked old enough to be the pilot. And when it was all done, I said, how much do I owe you? Well, the uniform's $386. I said, no problem, I'll just write you a check. I said, no, I can't take any checks. So I'll just pay you cash. No, can't take any cash. You need to fill out this computer card. Up in these boxes, put your employee number. Then we bill this back under uniform allowance. Comes out of your next Pan Am paycheck. Oh, that's even better. Go ahead and do that. So I don't know who paid for the uniform, but I didn't. Out the door I went. In New York, there were 2 airports, LaGuardia and Kennedy. LaGuardia is about 20 minutes from Manhattan. Kennedy's about 60. Because LaGuardia was the closer of the 2, that's where I went. I spent most of the morning walking around LaGuardia in the uniform, trying to figure out, now that I had this uniform, how the hell do you get on these planes? Well, I got a little hungry, so I walked in the luncheonette and I sat down at the counter on the stool ordered a sandwich. Moments later, a TWA crew walked in. Flight attendant sat in the booth, pilot stood up at the counter on either side of me, captain right next to me. Now, airline people consider themselves one big family, so the pilot didn't hesitate to talk to me, and the captain kind of leaned over and said, hey, young man, how's Pan Am doing? Doing just fine, Captain, just fine. Tell me, what's Pan Am doing out here at LaGuardia? Pan Am doesn't fly into LaGuardia, they only go into Kennedy. Well, I picked up on that right away. We came into Kennedy, had a short layover, came back over here to visit some friends of mine. Matter of fact, I'm on my way back to Kennedy now, as soon as I get the hell out of here. So tell me, young man, what type of equipment are you on? Now, that completely threw me. Airline people have a lot of jargon for things, and one of them is, they never refer to a plane as a plane or an aircraft, but equipment, in layman's terms. What type of equipment are you on? Means what type of plane do you fly? Back then, DC-8, 707. Of course, I didn't know that, and I thought, what type of equipment am I on? Only equipment I'm on is a stool. That must mean what type of equipment is on the plane I fly. So I thought, well, they have the wings, and they have the engine, and they always have a sticker on the engine, who made the engine. So I turned and said, yes, General Electric. All 3 pilots kind of just stopped eating and leaned over. The captain said, oh, really? Where do you fly? Washing machines? And I knew I said the wrong thing out the door and I went. Everybody had an airline ID card, much like a Missouri driver's license, a plastic laminated colored card, and yet without that ID card, the uniform was totally worthless. So I went back to Manhattan, pretty discouraged, thinking where would I ever come up with a Pan American Airline corporate ID card. And I was sitting in my hotel room, pondering all of that, when I noticed the big, thick Manhattan Yellow Pages. So I pulled them up on the bed and I split them open and looked under the word identification. There were 2 or 3 pages of companies who made convention badges, metal badges, plastic badges. And I started to call around, and finally one company said, listen, most of those airline IDs manufactured by Polaroid. 3M Company, data check. Need to call one of them. And I finally got the 3M Company on the phone, and they said, yes, we manufacture Pan Am's identification system. How come? So I'll tell you, I'm a purchasing officer for a major U.S. carrier. I'm in New York just for the afternoon. We're getting ready to expand our routes. We're going to hire a lot of new employees, go to a formal ID. I was wondering if I could come by your sales office and just look at a sample. We like this Pan Am layout format that you use. Certainly, come on by. So I went by dressed in a suit, and the sales rep opened the book, and he said, here you go, we do Eastern, Delta, United, Pan Am, right here. I said, yes, we like this Pan Am style. You think you might have a sample I could bring back to my board of directors for approval? Sure, I'll be right back. And he brought me back a 5x7 glossy piece of paper with a picture of an ID card printed on it. Picture of someone else in the picture, John Doe for a name, and in red ink across the front, this is a sample only. I said, no, I'm afraid this won't do. You know, I need to bring back an actual card so they can see the thickness, the size. And by the way, what is all this equipment right here? Oh, now, we don't just sell these cards. We sell the system. Camera, laminator, cutter, reducer. We'd have to buy all of this. Absolutely. But I tell you what, since we have to buy it all, why don't you just demonstrate how it works and use me? Fine, have a seat right here. Took my picture, made up the card, and out the door I went. When I was going down the elevator, I was studying the card, had a blue border over the top, about an inch thick in Pan Am color blue, but not a single thing on the card said Pan Am. No logo, no insignia, nothing that reflected it was their card. I almost threw it away, but I started to head back to the hotel. It was a plastic card, so you couldn't type on it, couldn't print on it, couldn't write on it. If you tampered with the plastic, you destroyed the card. As I was walking back, I noticed that I had passed a hobby shop, so I turned around and walked in. Excuse me, sir, I see you sell a lot of models here. Uh-huh. You sell models of commercial jetliners. Sure, over there. And I bought a Pan Am model of a 707 cargo jet for about $2.40. Took it back to my hotel room, opened the box, threw all the parts out. And at the bottom of the box were the decals that went on the model. And the little Pan Am logo that went on the tail went perfect right up at the top of the car. And the word Pan Am and the special styling and graphics that went across the wing went perfect right across the top of the card. And the clear decal on the laminated plastic made a beautiful identification card. Pan Am says they estimate that between the age of 16 and 18, I flew about 2 million miles for free. Pan Am says they can account for some 83 countries I was in. Pan Am says, do keep in mind, though, Frank Abengale did pose as one of our pilots. To our knowledge, he never once stepped on board one of our aircraft. That is correct. I never flew on Pan Am because I was afraid someone might say to me, you know, I'm based in San Francisco. I've been out there about 10 years, but I don't recall ever meeting you before. Or maybe someone might look at my ID card from another Pan Am employee and say, no, it doesn't exactly look like my ID card. So instead, I flew on everyone else. It was simple, a routine. I'd walk out to the airport in New York at Kennedy, look up on the board and see United Flight 800 to Chicago. I'd walk downstairs to United Operations and walk in the Pan Am uniform. The operations clerk would look up and see me. Hey, Pan Am, what can we do for you? One of the jump seats open on 800 to Chicago. I need to dead end into O'Hara. The jump seat? Yeah, it's open this evening. Let me get a pink slip pass, will you? And I'd give my ID and he'd write me out a pass. I'd walk out, hand it to the flight attendant. She'd open the door to the cockpit and I'd step in. There you had a captain, a co-pilot, a flight engineer, and an extra seat called the jump seat where pilots deadhead on company time. Now, once you picked up all the jargon, it was just a routine, because pilots love to talk shop. Once you picked up all of that, it was always the same conversation. I just step into the cockpit. Evening, gentlemen. Bob Davis, Pan Am. Welcome aboard, Bob. Take a seat. On the taxi out, always the same question. So, Bob, how long have you been with Pan Am? Oh, I've been flying about 7 years. What position you fly? Right seat, which is airline terminology for a co-pilot. What type of equipment are you on? Had that one down. Perfect. Matter of fact, whatever they flew, I didn't fly. So I had no problems with that. When we'd arrive in Chicago, I would get off that United flight, and I would walk over to the Pan Am ticket counter, closest I like to come to Pan Am people, and I'd walk up to the counter and say, excuse me, miss, where do we lay over here? The dead of the trip in here, never laid over in Chicago. Well, we use the Parliament House Hilton, sir, downtown, catch the crew bus on the lower level. And I'd go down to the Parliament House Hilton Hotel, and I'd walk in, and on the corner of the registration desk, there was all the little book, and a sign that said Airline Cruise, register here. And I'd walk over, sign in, show my ID, they'd give me a key. I'd stay 2 or 3 days. Pan Am would be billed for my room and my meals. I also could cash a check there up to $100 because I was an employee of the airline. The airline had a contract with the hotel, and they cashed their check while away from their base. However, then I found out that every airline honored every other airline employee's personal check up to $100. A reciprocal agreement still practiced today. A TWA pilot could walk up to a Delta ticket counter, show his ID, Delta would cash his personal check up to $100, and vice versa. When I found that out, I would go out to Kennedy or Los Angeles, and I would go to everybody, Northeast, KLM, Air France, and it would take me a good 8 hours stopping at every ticket counter and every building. By the time I got all the way around this airport to the far end of the terminal, at least 8 hours had gone by. And what do you have in 8 hours? Shift change, all new people, so I'd go all the way back around this way again. Made it great for the night. The only reason I quit at 18 is the FBI issued a John Doe warrant for interstate transportation of fraudulent checks for federal offense. A John Doe warrant meant the FBI didn't know my true identity, and the FBI at the time estimated in the warrant my age to be approximately 28. I was 18. I had a great deal of money, so I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, into a very swank singles complex that had just been built there called the Riverbend Apartments. On the application for the lease, there were many questions. One of them was occupation. I began to write down airline pilot, but the next question said employed by, supervisor's name, phone number. And I thought to myself, pretty classy place. I write down Pan Am pilot. They call Pan Am personnel in New York. They verify employment. Be all over. No, I'm going to have to come up with something that would be impossible to check out. It's something that would justify why I drive an expensive car, wear expensive clothes, don't work much. So I wrote down the word doctor. We're employed, nothing. This is the first thing came to my mind, doctor, so I wrote it down. Had a very inquisitive apartment manager. She said, oh, I see here you're a doctor. Yes, ma'am. What type of doctor are you? Well, I'm a medical doctor. However, I'm not practicing medicine right now. You see, I left my practice in Los Angeles with my associates to come to Atlanta to invest in some real estate holdings I have here, and I won't be practicing for about a year. How interesting. Well, tell me, what type of medical doctor are you? And I figured being a singles complex, pediatrician should be pretty safe. So I moved in, Dr. Frank Weeks, pediatrician. Now, everybody asks me the simple questions all the time. So, Doc, where'd you go to medical school? Columbia University in New York. Where did you serve your internship? Harvard Children's Hospital out in L.A. Once in a while when the guys would come over, hey, Paul, what's up? Hey, Doc, look at my leg. I don't know what I did to it. Look at this. Now, Paul, I can't examine your leg for you. You need to go to your own doctor and let him look at that. Oh, okay, I understand. And if one of the girls came by, I always gave them a thorough examination and sent them on their way. Stupid. I was living there about 2 or 3 months. Everything was going great. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. Opened the door, very distinguished gentleman standing there, about 55. Yes, sir, can I help you? Yes, you are Dr. Williams? Yes. My name is Gordon. Just moved in the apartment right below you. Wanted to come up and introduce myself. Ah, new neighbor. Come on in. Well, I'm not only a new neighbor. Understand that you are a pediatrician. That's correct. But we're colleagues. I'm the chief resident pediatrician of the hospital up the street. Next morning I started to pack. Then I thought, no, I don't want to start running again. I'm living here, breaking no laws, bothering nobody. I'll just ignore this guy. But Dr. Gordon loved to talk about medicine, and every day he would stop me on the way to my car, out to the swimming pool, tennis court. And not more than a minute or two about the weather, he'd be into medicine. Not being able to speak medical terminology, I knew that sooner or later he would get suspicious. Rather than move, every day I would go to Emory University's medical library in Atlanta from about 8 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon. Every day I read the daily journals from the Mayo Clinic and the London Clinic, knowing that no doctor kept up with daily journals. But I did. And every day I would take certain articles on pediatrics and I would take them into memory. And every day I would be sitting right in the parking slot of Dr. Gordon's apartment. And when he came home, I'd be right there. Hey, Doc, hear about this new theory they're using up at Mayo? What is it today? And I'd follow him into his apartment. And while he was getting undressed, I'd be sitting right on the end of his bed, talking a mile a minute. He'd be in the kitchen, I'd be right there. Going to his bathroom, I'd be outside the door. Pretty soon he'd come home. Hey, Doc, I don't have time to talk to you right now. I gotta go. Out the door I go. One afternoon he came over, he said, you know, we're opening a new hospital in Marietta, suburb of Atlanta, new county hospital. I'd like you to come to opening day. I knew there was no way around it, so I said, sure, I'll be happy to accompany you. Went up to the hospital, spent the entire day, met ward leads, nurses, department heads, administrators, doctors. And when I left the hospital, not a soul there didn't believe I was Dr. Frank Williams, pediatrician from Los Angeles, who just wasn't practicing. Well, that was fine, except I started to date one of the nurses I met there, and every so often I'd go pick her up. She was working a little late, I'd sit in the lobby and I'd wait for her. I was sitting there one evening when here comes the hospital administrator, who was not a physician, but the administrator of the hospital. Dr. Williams, I cannot believe you're here. Just got your home number from Dr. Gordon. On my way to my office to give you a call. Sir, it is urgent that I speak to you right away. Certainly. And I followed him in his office. He said, you know, I don't know how to ask you this. I don't even know how to begin to impose on you like this. But Dr. Gordon assures me that you would be more than happy to help us out. What's the problem? Well, on the midnight to 8 shift, I have a resident. He supervises a number of interns on his shift and nurses. He's just been notified of a death in his immediate family. He's returning to the West Coast tomorrow for about 10 days. The problem is that Georgia law requires the resident on duty either to be a full practitioner or a specialist. I have neither. With us being a new hospital, Atlanta having a shortage of doctors, us being in the suburbs, without working triple shifts, I don't know what to do. Dr. Gordon suggested that you had a great deal of free time, that you'd probably be more than happy to cover the shift for us for about 10 days. Without working triple shifts, I don't know what to do. Dr. Gordon suggested that you had a great deal of free time, that you'd probably be more than happy to cover the shift for about 10 days. I see. Well, I'll tell you what, I do have a lot of free time, and I'd be more than happy to do it, but you see, I'm afraid I'll have to say no. Why is that? Well, you see, I'm not licensed to practice medicine in the state of Georgia, only in the state of California, where I hold my residency. All the red tape just for 10 days. Well, no red tape. I'll bring it before the medical review board tomorrow morning, get a verbal okay, you can start tomorrow night. Oh. Now, being one who hates to pass up a challenge, I couldn't help but give it a shot. So the next thing you know, here I was in this hospital, 18 years old, smock on, stethoscope in my pocket, didn't know which end to start wearing, supervising his shift. Now, a lot of people say of all the things you did, the doctor had to be the most difficult. On the contrary, probably one of the easier things I did. I remember about 4 years ago, the Marietta, now a city of 250,000 people, Chamber of Commerce, invited me to come and be their annual dinner speaker. Most of the hospital staff came. When it was over, people would come up with things like, oh, you know, we kind of knew you weren't a doctor. Because the big thing was that people said, you know, no one knew how to take you. You had such a good attitude about yourself. You know, no one knew how to do you. Kind of like Alan Alda was a match. But it was I who didn't know how to take them. I remember the first night the nurse stopped me on the floor about 2 a.m. Listen, doctor, I know you haven't done this since school days, but when administrating the shift, you must write your observations in the chart before the conclusion of the shift. Ah, yes, the chart. I left it for you at the nurse's station. Thank you. And I go up to the nurse's station, opened the chart, couldn't read a word. You have to see the way these doctors write. Couldn't make out a letter. I thought if I came along, nice penmanship, wrote something didn't make a lot of sense, they know I was funny. So I would scribble for about 3 lines. I mean, I didn't write a letter. I just scribbled along. And I signed. What bothered me is the nurses would always come back, 70? Okay. No problem? No problem at all. Nobody ever asked me what the hell I wrote. Another thing I didn't like was every so often you'd hear, Dr. Williams to emergency, please. Dr. Williams to emergency, please. Used to hate to be called to emergency because I can't stand such blood. So I didn't hang out down in emergency. Never went down. They'd always bring in somebody's cover saying, in every hospital, what we call an ERT, emergency room technician, he deals in L&D life and death situations, has a question overflow to send it to the intern, and the interns would sometimes call down the resident. If I would get called down, I would walk into emergency 3, but I never walked up to the table because if the guy was bleeding, I'd probably throw up all over him. But I always came in very aggressive. Dr. Bond, you call me? Sorry to bother you, doctor. Severe enclosure of the cardiac. I didn't know if the guy had an abortion, had a heart attack, or Dr. Bond, is this a life and death situation? Life and death? Of course not, doctor. This was standard procedure. We were just, and Dr. most respected resident because I was the only one who let the interns do anything. So nurses didn't like me too much because I was always chasing these little candy suckers. So they were my age. Nurses were close to me in the school. But there about 9 days when the hospital administrator told me the man I was relieving had resigned and was not returning. Well, they wanted staying on until they found a replacement. Figure what the hell, I'd already been there 9 days. Stayed there 1 year, 12 months, 5 nights a week. No one ever found out I was not a doctor. I resigned on my own and left. Years later, the New York Times said in a sarcastic article that what I did there was not difficult at all. The New York Times said Abengale knew under Georgia law, under temporary certificates, he could not diagnose, administer drugs, examine or treat patients. He could only administrate the shift. Abengale knew people very well, and he knew enough about medicine to get by. They're right. The year I was there, never laid a finger on patients, never diagnosed anything, never administered any drugs, just the shift. I left there and went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because I heard the Attorney General's office was looking for lawyers. And I figured if you can be a doctor, you certainly can be a lawyer. The reason I picked Louisiana is Louisiana did not require a law degree to take the bar. Anyone could take the bar. If you passed the bar, you were a licensed lawyer. Louisiana changed those statutes only in the 70s. Louisiana was then, is now, always will be, of course, the only state in our country who chooses to practice their law under the French Napoleonic Criminal Code of Procedure. The New York Times said had Abengale been a Harvard graduate, magna cum laude in law, and gone to Louisiana, he would have had to study the Napoleonic Criminal Code, only practiced by the state of Louisiana, to even begin to take the bar. I studied it, took the bar, and passed the bar, and became a licensed attorney in the state of Louisiana under the name Bob Conrad. I worked under then Attorney General T.S. Permian in the Civil Division of the State Court, where I tried civil cases against and for the state for about 1 year before I left on my own and resigned. Many years later, when it was determined who I was, 2 major oil companies sued the state of Louisiana, saying the attorney who represented the state in judgments rendered against the oil companies were improper and should be recalled, since the attorney representing the state turned out to be not qualified to do so. However, that went all the way to the U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans, where the 3-court judge panel made the final ruling and said, "It is our opinion that Frank Abengale, now in prison, did impersonate a lawyer. However, he did pass the Louisiana bar. There was no college degree required. And he did practice the law, and there was no age requirement. Consequently, his cases will stand as they are, and they have to this day." I left there and went to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. They were looking for a professor of sociology PhD. Wasn't difficult, led 1 chapter ahead of my students, they never knew the difference. The only problem was being a Catholic trying to impersonate a Mormon. But you know, a lot of people say, yeah, but you know, you also became a very famous thief. I mean, by the time you were 21, you were wanted in some 26 countries around the world. And Interpol, back in the 70s, said that you were probably one of the 8 master criminals of the world. Well, I did a lot of things that had never been done before. So consequently, they got a lot of attention. And I think my age added to that. I was walking down Chicago Street one afternoon counting 5 $20 bills I had in my pocket. That's all I had. As I was counting them, I passed the front door of a bank. So I stopped. And I thought to myself, I'll go in this bank and I'll open a checking account with this $100. I'll use this phony Pan Am ID for identification. In 2 weeks, the bank will mail me 200 checks with this name. And with this ID, I'll cash them anywhere. So I walked in, opened the account. New account girl came back, said, "Here's your receipt for your deposit, sir, and here's some temporary checks. We'll be mailing you your printed checks in about 10 days. Now, I couldn't help it. I was always inquisitive. Excuse me, Miss, one question. I noticed that you didn't give me any deposit slips. Well, no, sir, they come from the check printer. They'll be in the back of your checkbook, printed with your name, your account number, and you'll get those in about 10 days. I see. And if I wish to make a deposit, let's say tomorrow, oh, no problem. So you see that table there in the lobby? Has all those forms on it? You go over there and help yourself to a blank deposit slip, write your name in, Write your account number in. Just use those to get your printed one. So I walked over and took a big stack of them off the shelf. Nobody cared. Went back to my hotel room, couldn't sleep. Kept staring at that stack of deposit slips. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, look across the room at that dresser at those deposit slips, and I'd say to myself, I want this. So when the morning came, I went out and bought some magnetic ink pen shoes to encode account numbers on checks and deposit slips. I encoded my account number the bank had assigned to me the day before on the bottom of every one of these blanks. I then went back to the bank, put them on the shelf in the lobby, and everyone who came in deposited their check directly in my account. I had about $40,000 at the end of the day, needless to say, I made a withdrawal. I was at the Logan International Airport in Boston. I was trying to catch a flight. It was 11:45 at night. I noticed the whole airport closing down, so I walked up to one of the counters. Are you not closing the airport, are you? Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we are in San Diego and Boston, lying in the heart of the city. We're kind of the government's noise abatement control program. We shut down all jet operations after midnight. Next flight out is at 6:30 in the morning. I sat down wondering what to do. I noticed all the ticket counters, rent-a-cars, gift shops, all closing down, sticking their money in cash in these big night bags, and then they'd sit them closed and lock them. Then they'd walk down the hall in the airport to the bank that was in the terminal. They'd stick their key in the night box, open it, drop the bag down the slot, make sure it went all the way down, close it. One right after the other, Delta, United, Eastern, Hertz, Avis. And I sat there and watched these people as they went home dropping these money bags in the box. And so the next night I came out to the airport about 11:45. This time I was wearing a bank guard uniform. And I was pushing a little cart with a dolly, and I had some press-on letters with the name of the bank on the side. And I hung a beautiful sign up in the night box that said, "Night box out of order. Please leave all deposits with guard on duty." Everyone did. I was the one sitting there nervous going, how the hell can a box get out of order? I mean, that's like a mailbox. The bag. I also used to cut checks, and I cutted them for a great deal of money. And in that case, we have three scenarios. We have what we call the kite, the front, and the sting. Now, a sting, of course, is where a con man makes a profit. But a front, where a con man spends a great deal of money. Front is building an image. The better the image, the easier the sting. A good image takes about 10 weeks. Costs anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 cash. That's out of his pocket. He spends that money to create this image in order to make the sting profitable. He knows he'll make back 4 times his investment, but he first must spend it. In this particular case, I rented a penthouse suite in the Fountain Blue Hotel in Miami. Back then, the suite I was in was $600 a day. I lived there for 10 weeks. I had a Rolls Royce and a chauffeur. I wore the most expensive clothes money could buy. I tipped only $20 bills, just simple things like bringing me a newspaper or opening a car door. To the 1,100 employees of Fountain Blue, I was Alan C. Scott, multi-millionaire stockbroker in his early 30s from California. That's exactly what I wanted them to think. On about the 9th week, I must have over-impressed the general manager of the Fountain Blue, for he stopped me in the lobby. Mr. Scott, I know you're very busy, sir. Could I take a moment of your time to introduce you to someone? Certainly. Your Honor, one of our distinguished guests, Sir Alan C. Scott. Scott is honored, the mayor of Miami, Mayor King. Minnie was there to give a luncheon speech. We talked for a few minutes. I turned to walk away. With an old-time drug politician, he said, Mr. Scott, yes, Your Honor, I'm giving a private dinner party at my home tonight. Black tie affair. I'd like you to come as my personal guest. 8 o'clock? Thank you, Your Honor. 8 o'clock. How much chauffeur? We'll give you the directions. 8 o'clock, I pulled up at the mayor's home, the Rolls Royce, went in the tuxedo, started mingling with the crowd. When I noticed this beautiful blonde sitting up at the bar, she was about 24 years old, obviously alone. But I noticed that every so often she was signing autographs for the guests. One of the servants walked by. Excuse me, I don't go to movies, and I absolutely never watch television. Is that an actress? Oh, no, sir. Cover girl. Been on the cover of Cosmopolitan, Vogue, 17, Farmer Girl, you name it. There are some who say she will probably become the most successful model ever to come out of Florida. Would you like to meet her? Because I'd love to. And I was introduced to Cheryl. Cheryl was quite impressed, thought I was 32, wealthy. Asked me if that was my Rolls Royce outside. I said, yes, one of them. And we talked on until about 2:30 in the morning, and finally I said, listen, Cheryl, how would you like to come back to my place as a hospital and have a night camp? Said, you know, Mr. Scott, I've always wanted to have a man like you. Said, pardon? Well, I always wondered what it would be worth for someone like you to take someone like me back to your place for the whole night. Said, well, I had no idea. Being 19, I had no idea either. To make me an offer. So, I don't know, Cheryl, $300? I don't think so. Well, look, Cheryl, I'm going to model with it. How about if I double it? $600. I don't think so. Well, you know, Cheryl, we could be here all night thinking about the price. I say, well, why don't you forget about coming to my place for the whole night? Why don't you just take me to your place, say for 2 hours, not a minute more, and I'll give you $1,000 cash in advance, up front, for just 2 hours. Good. That's good. So we got in the Rolls Royce. She lived in the Sheraton Bayshore Hotel. We got up to her room. It was about 3:30 in the morning. She started to open her door, and I very politely leaned over. Now, excuse me, Cheryl, you go ahead in, and I'll be right back. She jumped up, grabbed my arm. What do you mean, you'll be right back? Oh, well, I carried $1,000 in my pocket. I was just going to go downstairs here in the lobby, cash the check. I'll be right back. You mean to tell me you don't have this cash with you? Oh, no, but you think this hotel's going to cash $1,000 check at 3:30 in the morning, and you're not even a guest to this hotel? Well, this isn't just a check. This is a cashier's check from the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York. Like gold, they'll cash it. Let me see. This is a cashier's check. Why don't you just endorse it over me? Well, I couldn't do that. Why not? Well, you see, this check is for $1,400. We've already agreed on $1,000. So Cheryl gave me $400 change. The check was no good, and we both got screwed that night. Needless to say, Cheryl doesn't take checks anymore. Meantime, the FBI was sending wanted posters out all over the world for me, and on the poster, they always had at the bottom of my poster, and I always was amused by this because FBI described me in the poster as being impeccably dressed, that I wore very expensive clothes, and I always carried a bright silk, colorful handkerchief in the breast pocket of my coat. The handkerchief to the FBI was my trademark because it was all with silk, all with bright color. But I always laughed at that because when I was 16 years old, I didn't know how to fold the silk handkerchief. I could never get them to sit in my pocket where I could always slide down or pop out. So when I was 16, I found a substitute, and today at 40, so I have hundreds of colors. I've always carried the same thing in my pocket since I was 16 years old. It's a great handkerchief because no matter how you stick it in your pocket, it looks terrific. You don't have to fool with it or anything. Just throw it in there, it looks great. Don't mess with it at all. You know, like any criminal, sooner or later you get caught. I was no exception to the rule. I was caught just once when I was 21 years old, 5 years after I ran away. I was caught by the French police in a little town called Montpellier. I was charged by the French government with forgery in the country. 26 countries filed warrants for my arrest, but the French government said, not so fast. We caught him. When we're done with him, whoever filed next in line may have him. I was convicted in a French court, sent to French prison. Years later, I wrote about the French prisons in chapter 7 in my book. Jean Charles said, most powerful chapter I have ever read in any book concerning any subject. The French prison was quite an experience. When convicted of a crime in France, the person being convicted is not told the length of their sentence. They are sent to prison unaware of whether they are about to serve 30 days or 30 years. They never know the length of their sentence till their sentence has been completed. Part of the punishment. I served my time in a place called the Maison d'Arrêt, house of arrest, in a little town called Perpignan, down by the Spanish border, during the winter time, when the temperature is about 20, 30 degrees. I served my time in a building built in the 17th century out of stone. Had no plumbing, had no electricity. Needless to say, they had no heating. When I arrived there, I was totally stripped of all the clothing I had on. And when I was completely nude, I was taken down to a steel door. When the steel door opened in, there was a big drop, about 2 feet, down, into a room that was 5 feet by pitch black, couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Literally, half the size of your closet. In the corner was a bucket. That's all there was. At first you thought to yourself, they would keep a human being in here. Obviously, this is some kind of scare tactic I'm going to be put through. But you soon realized that was the cell. And when they locked that door, they had no intention of opening it till the sentence was over. He went to the bathroom in his bucket. In a short period of time, urine and waste overflowed out of the bucket onto the floor. The urine burnt your skin, so you screamed and yelled for them to hose you down, hose the cell down, but they didn't. After time, the urine and waste got to be over a foot high in the cell, so you had to keep sitting up to keep from drowning in your own waste. I went from 198 pounds to 109 pounds, a possible pneumonia. I almost lost my life physically there, and yet the most difficult part was trying to keep your sanity. Sitting in a pitch black room where you couldn't even see your hand, wondering if it was day or night, if anyone knew you were alive. Bread and water for breakfast, bread and soup for lunch, bread and coffee for dinner. Came in a little window up at the top. They opened it, they put their plate in, they closed it, then unlocked your side. So no light came in, you reached up, you pulled the tray down. It was a small tray, very little food on it. Never knew how old the food was until they did. After 6 months from the day I was placed in there, I was taken out on all fours, could not stand up, extremely ill. I was cleaned up for the first time on all fours like a dog, haircut, nails cut. And when I was dressed, the clothes I came in had to be tied with a rope around the neck and face. I was put in a wheelchair and wheeled out of the French prison. I was told that my sentence was 1 year. They were suspending 6 months of it to send me to Sweden, who had requested my extradition there on charges of forgery, and I was extradited to Sweden. It is interesting to note that during the filming of the movie about my life, Hollywood wanted to make sure that it was done entirely on location, right down to the prisons I was in. Hollywood went back there, thinking that they would have to open this prison, remodel it like it was then, and shoot from there. To their surprise, they found the prison open, operating the same way it operated in the early 1970s. And the film takes place in the exact cell I was in the exact prison I was in. Not much has changed. I was sentenced in Sweden to a prison term, which I served in Malmö, Sweden. When my prison term was up in Sweden, the third country to extradite me was the United States. I was returned to this country, and on the day of my arrival, I was arraigned in federal court, charged with interstate transportation of fraudulent checks and flight to avoid prosecution. The judge who sentenced me, federal judge Neil Edenfield, said, "You know, Mr. Abengale, I am supposed to try you as a juvenile because all the crimes you committed in this country you committed before your 21st birthday. And this is in reality your first offense, which you've never been caught before, except this one time. However, the dollar amount of the crime you committed makes that impossible. I'm going to try you as an adult, and I'm going to sentence you to 10 years in federal prison." I served 5 of the 10 years in the federal prison in Virginia. I was 26 years old. I came out of prison with a bus ticket, $50, and a suit of clothes. I was sent to Houston, Texas, where I was told I would serve 5 more years under very strict supervised parole, 1 mistake, and back to prison for the remaining 5 years. I went to Houston, got a job at the Pizza Inn, started as a waiter, bought an old beat-up $300 car in time, had an apartment, had no furniture in it, paid month-to-month rent. In 6 months, Pizza Inn had made me an assistant manager. Each night I made the deposit to the bank. 6 months into that job, I was promoted into a management training program. My papers went to Dallas to be approved. My name is not Smith or Jones, it's Abengale. Only persons having that name are directly immediately related to me. Someone in Dallas saw that name, recognized it, called the manager down in Houston, and told him to fire me. Manager said, so what, he did that back when he was a teenager, and he does a good job, he puts the money in the bank, I never lost a dime, fire him. I went to work for a grocery store, supper, midnight to 8 when the store was closed. Worked for the grocery store for about a year. But the company was impressed because I was cleaning up intelligence, so they promoted me into a training program. Found my record, and after a year, they fired me. 13 realizing that obviously I can't change my name on parole. And because I can't change what I did, and obviously because it was negative, I would have to turn it around into something positive. I started a company in Houston, Texas, 13 years ago, called Abengale Associates out of my apartment. I had to have a job, so I worked in a movie theater at night showing movies. In the daytime, I started developing programs for financial institutions to use in-house. Today, 13 years later, my company in Houston employs over 100 people there, grosses about $10.5 million a year in services to the federal government and to the financial institutions both in this country and some 24 countries around the world. Today, most of my talking is, of course, always directed to financial institutions, always very technical. However, when I get asked to talk about my life, it's a little bit different, but not. Over the years I've been in business, I have personally removed $2.5 million from my personal income, and I have returned it to the United States Attorney General's office with the instructions that every single penny be returned to every bank, every airline, and every hotel. The U.S. Attorney's Office a few years ago confirmed that every single dime has been paid back on every check they had a record of that I wrote almost 20 years ago. Today, not one company, one business, both foreign or here in the United States, without one dime for any of the crimes I executed. During 1980, I wrote a book called Catch Me If You Can, an autobiography. To my surprise, 3 weeks after it was published by Simon & Schuster, it became a national bestseller, number 4 on the nonfiction books. It stayed there for an incredible 15 consecutive straight months. It went on to sell 3 million copies. In 1982, released in paperback for the first time, the average paperback has a life expectancy of 6 months. Today, in 1988, in its 69th printing, still in print, it sold some 4 million copies in paperback, and now in 9 different languages, including Chinese, and still 8 years out of publication on the top 25 best-selling books on the market. Copy a Picture, in a joint venture with Paramount, has spent $26 million making a movie about my life entitled Catch Me If You Can. The actor who portrays me in the film, between the ages of 16 and 21, is a young actor named Tom Cruise, who plays Frank Abengale in the movie and portrays my life. I have a bit part in the film, cameo role. I play the part of an FBI agent. So Catch Me If You Can is scheduled for release next year. Usually when I get asked to talk about my life, I always like to end it in my own way because I would never like anyone to walk out of the room and think that what I did was something that should be envied or something that was very glamorous. I haven't done a press interview in 7 years simply because I, unlike the media, never thought what I did was very glamorous. You know, I came from a very close Catholic family. By the time I had reached my 16th birthday, I had never been out of my home overnight one day away from my parents. My father was a very, very affectionate man who never allowed his children to go to bed one night of their life that he didn't walk into each of their rooms, drop down on one knee, lean over the bed, kiss you on the cheek, hug you, and then whisper in your ear that he loved you. Every single night of my life, I can literally say I do not know one he missed. Even on his way, coming home, he nearly kissed you, he hugged you, told you he loved you. My brother was 6'4" in the Marine Corps, but when he came home on leave, my father walked around to his bed, kissed him, hugged him, told him he loved him. So when I was 16 years old, French prison. My father, 55 years old, extremely healthy man, tripped in a subway in New York, fell back, couldn't catch his balance, hit his head, and died. I never got to see him buried, and I never got to tell him how much I loved him, how very special he was, how important he was in my life. In a couple of days, it'll be Father's Day. And ever since then, every Father's Day, I miss my father more and more. I think how great it would be to be able to go to see my father, tell him I love him, hug him, buy him lunch, tell him I'm grateful I am for all that he's been through to being my father. Through all of this, I was very fortunate. I was brought up in a great country where somebody always gets a second chance, and I was given mine. In a country where it's never too late to be what you might have been. So I turned my life around, and it turned out very well. I lived a very quiet life on a ranch in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I spent very little time in my offices in Houston, and I think a great deal about my past. Through all this, I've learned one thing, and I'd like to leave you with that. Life is very simple to understand. Doesn't take a philosopher, doesn't take anyone with a great deal of intelligence to understand why we exist as human beings on the face of the earth, no matter what nationality we are. It comes down to a very simple word called family. Family is what life is all about. Family. If you have a mother and father, and you think back just for a moment and reflect how they spent some 40 years of their lives devoted to loving you, caring for you, taking care of you, through good times and bad times. Fatherhood is the greatest joy in the world, but with fatherhood comes a tremendous responsibility. No one knows what it's like to be a father until one becomes a father. Just as young, wondering if to be able to provide his children at the home the things they have today, tomorrow, make their life better, keep them from emotional harm and physical hurt. I say to you that if you're fortunate enough to have a father on Sunday, you're a very lucky person. If you're fortunate enough to call him and tell him you love him, and how much you care for your family, you're a very lucky person. Me personally, I've really never admired a man much for his money, materialistic things. But I admire a man that he loves his wife, he's faithful to her, and that he loves his children, and that he's a good father. Because no matter what else a man has, if he's a good father, he's accomplished everything on the earth he's come here for. And if he's a good father, then he's done everything in life. If you're fortunate enough to leave here tonight and go back to a woman who loves you, the mother of your children, you're lucky enough to go back to a husband who loves you and shares his life with you, the father of your children. And if you're lucky enough to go back and walk in that bedroom and kiss that child, hug them for just a moment, and think how important they are, you're a very lucky person. Because if you have your family, you have everything in life. There is nothing, absolutely nothing more important than your family. And probably that's why tonight is so important. Because children are important. Not only our own children, but the children of the world are everyone's responsibility. That's what life is about. Just love is a child. There's parents who love them very much. And that's why we came here tonight. And I'm honored to be able to come to a community, small, yet so supportive of such a worthwhile cause. That's made it a great pleasure for me to be here. And on behalf of everyone, we thank you very much. And God bless you. Thanks for coming this evening. Good night.
Thank you, Frank, for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to present to you this on behalf of all of us who sponsored this evening with our appreciation for coming. Thank you. We have to take any further contributions on behalf of the Love family. There's a crystal ball located in the back of the room by the door. We've used the crystal ball so that we may help Jeff to see a fire tomorrow. Thank you all for coming and thank you for your help.